Good evening. We'd like to call this meeting to order. This Operations Management, Budget, and Government Accountability meeting for our departmental budget hearings. My name is Council President TJ Clark, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. Tonight we have presentations by Metro Hartford Innovation Services and the Hartford Public Schools Board of Education. This meeting is broadcasting live on HPA-TV, Xfinity Channel, Government Channel 96, and Frontier Government Channel 6032. It is also being streamed via HPA-TV.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, HPA-TV Apple TV, Amazon TV, Roku TV apps, and also will be made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. I would like to introduce my colleagues who are here tonight. I'm joined by our Majority Leader, Kelly Bilodeau, Councilman Josh Mitchum. On our screen, we have Councilman Alex Thomas. Tonight's presentation, our first presentation department will be Metro Hartford Innovation Systems, and we have our Chief Innovation Officer, Cherie Snipes, who will lead the way. Good evening.
Good evening, Council President Clark. Good evening, Majority Leader Bilodeau and Councilman Mitchum. Tonight, I will be presenting the MHIS 2027 recommended budget. First, I'll read our mission and purpose. Our mission and purpose is to provide reliable IT services. MHIS ensures secure and reliable technology systems that support efficient city operations and service delivery. Modernization of systems, replacing legacy systems with modern, interoperable solutions reduces risk and enhances service and efficiency. Cybersecurity and data protection. MHIS safeguards sensitive data with proactive risk management and continuous threat monitoring. Data-driven decision-making, providing timely, accurate data access, empowers leadership to plan, allocate resources, and improve programs. Next is our department organization chart. We currently have 41 positions. 20 of those positions are city, 21 are Hartford Public Schools. We have a few vacancies that we are working with HR to get filled. So hopefully that number will go up sometime this year and we'll get more members to our team. Next is a few of our 2026 highlights for our development team and the projects that they worked on thus far. We launched a new internal intranet website for city employees where they have access to information and benefits that is offered. We developed a new Bloomberg Youth Employment website for the Youth Initiative. We implemented the Hartford Public Schools Health System. We completed the Kronos Cloud integration for the police department. We deployed a new mobile asset module in Munis that's going to help us track all city assets in our financial system. We also worked with management and budget to implement a new grants management platform, and we developed a new HR dashboard. I'm going to turn it over to Brett Floden, who is our application data manager.
Hello, good evening. So I'm just going to go through a few projects. There's a few on this list, but I'll kind of keep it brief. So one of the things we implemented, we created some permitting dashboards that show the different permits that are statuses for like planning, DPW, and the building department, and made them available to the public. We also launched a website that showcased different economic development projects in the city, and we're working to enhance that with that department. We also migrated all of our GIS websites from a third-party vendor into the ESRI software platform, which is what we use to manage all our data to reduce our annual maintenance costs. We did a lot of citywide street address updates that they use in the emergency services, use in the CAD system for both police and fire. We mapped all the storm drainage infrastructure and the city parks, or all the city parks for public works. That was for the MS4 compliance, and they went and tested all of them. We worked with the Registrar of Voters to verify the election district boundaries, and worked with the Connecticut State's Office because they were verifying voter addresses using GIS, and they were moving to that platform. We also rebuilt our online permitting and licensing portal to make it easier for folks to enter applications online and also licenses. We also worked with the Public Works Department and the Acela platform to implement an illegal dumping application so they could track illegal dumping in the city so that they know where it's happening and maybe do something in the future with cameras to like help track it and have it not happen in the future. We work with the Code Enforcement Department to track rental licensing violations for the housing code inspectors. We also implemented a sanitation violation record in Acela for Public Works to be able to track sanitation violations so that they could see repeat offenders and maybe help to curb that in the future. And within the licensing, permitting and licensing platform, we implemented an environmental health food inspection checklist that the health inspectors go out and inspect various restaurants in the city. And we also built quite a few custom reports across all the different departments in the city so that they could provide reports to you and to different members of their team to show how many applications were being done and inspections were being performed. Thank you.
Next, we'll pass it over to Joel Figueroa, who is our network manager.
Good evening. So we will touch upon a few projects that we finished. We designed and configured the new network infrastructure for Buckley High School. It was a huge undertaking and a long time, but the site consists of over 200 cameras, 250 access points, and over 100 network switches. We were a part of migrating central office staff from their old location back to Buckley to ensure that there was a seamless transition and that business continuity was maintained. We upgraded the wireless infrastructure across all city buildings and sites. So this allows us to give the city employees a more cohesive and seamless wireless experience as they move from building to building. We upgraded the phone system for the Hartford Public Schools, where we retired over 1,100 about 25-year-old endpoints that were going to cause a potential security vulnerability. So that was something that we were able to do to ensure that we're able to patch our routing equipment and our back-end VoIP infrastructures. Devices. We completed phase 1 of the public safety network infrastructure, which also they had equipment from when the building opened maybe 13 years ago. So that equipment was aging. It was causing stability issues and presenting possible security vulnerabilities. We finished phase 1 and we're about to start phase 2 just before the end of this fiscal year. We installed network infrastructure over at the Great Path Academy over at Manchester Community for their esports program. Leveraging the new technology, we were able to stretch out the enterprise network to make it seem as if they were locally connected within Hartford to leverage our security and network infrastructure. We completed the wireless upgrades at Goodwin Park so that they could monitor so that they can work with their new golf cart system, monitoring maintenance. And last, we secured a grant to expand the free public Wi-Fi in the Upper Albany neighborhood. It's just over $560,000, 100% reimbursed from the state, so it would eventually cost the city nothing. And this will extend free public Wi-Fi into the Upper Albany and Clay Arsenal neighborhoods.
I'll continue with the cybersecurity projects that we've worked on. We implemented a new security system enabling faster responses to account lockouts. We deploy a new import protection solution across all city devices, supported C4 with deployment of their new Flock security camera infrastructure, configure camera systems to enable live stream student sporting events, remediated 61 confirmed account compromises over the past 12 months. That means, employees had their accounts compromised through phishing emails. With that, we deployed a new email security solution to protect against malware and phishing. In the past 90 days, the system automatically processed 10,490 emails, identified 109,430 spam or phishing messages, and achieved an average 73% automatic remediation rate. Working behind the scenes on the city, we are currently working behind the scenes on the citywide Google platform rollout. That's a continuing project for us. Data center projects. This is our data center. This is the hub where all of our systems live. We upgraded all of our virtual infrastructure to improve performance and reliability, modernized our data center infrastructure with new core systems, implemented a new enterprise backup platform to strengthen data protection and improve management of city data, improve reliability and uptime of mission-critical systems. This strategy also reduces risk of data loss through modernized backup and recovery capabilities. It also increases system resilience to support emergency operations and continuity of services, and it positioned the city's infrastructure to support future system growth and modernization for the next 10 years. Going to talk about support services. This is our help desks and our field techs. We have about 8 field techs and 6 help desk personnel. Since July 1st of 2025, the help desk opened 13,711 tickets and successfully closed 13,147, ensuring continuity of city operations. They provided daily technical support that enables city and HPS employees to securely access systems, data, and applications needed to serve students and residents. They supported the full technology deployment for the new Buckley High School, ensuring staff and students were ready on opening day. They supported students and educators through device deployment, classroom applications, and school-based technology support. They also deployed and supported student assessment and instructional applications critical to classroom instruction and learning outcomes. They delivered on-site and remote support that minimizes downtime and allows employees to focus on core services rather than technical issues. They enable frontline staff to focus on public service delivery rather than technology challenges. Now I'm going to speak about our strategic initiatives. Our first initiative is enterprise system modernization. I talked about that a little earlier. We're upgrading critical applications, support in finance, HR, and operations to enhance efficiency and performance. We're doing cloud migration and optimization, shifting infrastructure to the cloud to improve resilience, reduce on-premise reliance, and enhance disaster recovery. We're building on cybersecurity maturity, strengthening governance, training, tooling, and incident response to minimize organizational security risks. Data governance and analytics. We're establishing data standards and improving quality to enable comprehensive reporting and analysis. Business process automation, automating repetitive workflows to reduce errors and free staff for higher value tasks. Workforce development and succession, retaining technical knowledge and adapting to emerging technologies through training and planning of our staff. Our budget comparison for fiscal year 26 and 27. For 26, our budget was $5,956,521. This year, our budget is $6,013,394, a difference of 1% of That is $56,873. And that's because of vendor maintenance and licensing costs increases offset partially by budgeted attrition. Budget highlights and areas of focus. We're focusing on providing stable and reliable systems. We will continue that, going on by focusing and maintaining high availability and reliability of critical systems like networks and public safety technology. We put a huge investment in cybersecurity. Budget supports tools and practices protecting city data and resident information from cyber threats. Modernization and risk reduction, replacing aging systems to reduce operational risk and avoid costly emergency replacements. That is something that's big right now because of the tariffs that's going on, so we want to make sure that we don't have any high price budgetary acts. So we're trying to stay ahead of the game with that. Customer service experience improvements, enhancing usability and speed and response time to improve service for internal users and residents. Our staff composition for all employees. In my department, we have 8% that live in the city of Hartford, 92% that do not live in the city of Hartford. Our race and ethnicity, Hispanic, 8% African American, 33% Caucasian, 52%, and other, 7%. 15% for female, 85% for male. And we need to fix that female. We need more women in STEM and IT, and that's one of my goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Snipes. I will open up the floor for questions. We will start with my colleagues online. I'll go with Councilman Thomas.
Thank you, Council President. I don't have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Rosado.
Yes, apologies for not having my camera on. Through you, Council President, Ms. Snipes, thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for your leadership. I'm so excited to hear that the rollout of the Google Translate has been so successful up to now. I know that the Board of Ed is using it, so congratulations on that rollout. I'm looking forward to seeing it here in City Council.
Thank you.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for the presentation. Just one question, I think, and there was a lot of projects we're working on, projects that are done. A thing that I always ask DDS about is, and that they've sort of promised me for an unknown future, is a system where Excella, I think it's Excella, which sort of tracks the complaints and rental housing complaints, where the public and us would be able to see where the complaints are coming from, see how long it takes to resolve complaints. And I think I'm on year 4 of being told that MHIS is working on it, and any day now. And, one of my sincerest dreams, which I think my colleagues share, is that I won't be on council forever. And so I think I'd like to know how long do I have to stay on council to see that system in place?
Yeah. So you're asking for a dashboard with that information, correct?
Correct. That the public can have access to.
Did we build?
So maybe we could talk about it afterwards, because we have the ability to do it now. So I'm not sure what the actual ask is. So if you want to reach out to me afterwards, we can talk about it.
Well, let me ask you, I will, but let me ask you this. If you have the ability to do it now, has DDS not asked you to do it?
Not to my knowledge.
That's news I can use. Thank you.
Councilman Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and my apologies for walking in after you had started. I have a couple of curious curiosity questions, and I don't know if they're questions you can answer, or I know our budget director, Mr. Julian, is here. Maybe these are questions more for him. And I've probably asked this before, because every year when I look at this budget and I see we just have one number and we don't have any detail as we get for every other department. And so that's my first question is, do you know why we only get one number for your total budget? We don't get the kind of line item detail that we get for others.
Yeah, we can send that over. I think we've sent it in the past. We have a spreadsheet where we have both our city budget and our school budget, so you can see the breakdown of everything that's in it. I could email that over.
I would appreciate it, certainly. Others may as well. And so what we're looking at is just the city side of the MHIS budget.
Correct.
And there's an equivalent board side of this
Correct.
budget. Second question is that I see in the last couple of years, when they give us a breakdown of what the budget amount was and what was actually spent, that the numbers are identical. That's kind of rare in my experience in the city, that you spend exactly to the penny what has been budgeted.
Yeah, it's all services. Like I don't want to say like we're a utility, but we pay the bills. We pay the internet bills. We pay Eversource bills for our equipment out on the poles, services, maintenance agreements. So we get those budgetary numbers ahead of time, and then we open our POs and we pay down to the penny. Sometimes we have $6 left. Sometimes we have $100 left. I'm good at negotiating, right? So I get that good number up front, and then we spend.
So what I'm looking at then is indeed the case, that there was no excess left over in your budget, let's say last year,
No.
in the city side of your budget.
No, nothing except attrition from positions that haven't been filled yet.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question on modernization. What does that plan look like, and what costs come along with a plan like that?
So modernization is replacing aging equipment. So, and that's no longer supported by the vendors. So back in 2018, we bought systems that run our environment, like when you log in, that's connected to a system. So we, through VET, and we broke it out in phases, phase 1, 2, and I think 3. It leveraged out to maybe 700,000 or 800,000 over a few years. And that's just for the data center. The network that Joelle talked about was for public safety. It was built back in 2010 or 12. So that number was about 700,000, around there. But we break them up in phases every year to do so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your presentation, Director. A couple questions. We understand MHIS is like the brainchild for the entire city of Hartford operation and Board of Ed. But how truly is MHIS integrated into systems such as the C4 cameras that we see, and hopefully whenever we get the speed cameras and red light cameras, will MHIS have any type of involvement or integration regarding that?
Yes, we're involved in everything external. They're connected through fiber, or it's called a cradle point. It's like a really big hotspot. We do the configurations in-house, and we work with Vulcan to get it installed. So it's all part of the city's infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. And regarding the fiber optic network, has that been fully deployed across the city?
Not yet. That's still my my pet peeve. So we started in the north end, as you know. We were gifted infrastructure that was about 25 years old. We spent about $200,000 to resurrect it, and we've been building off of it. So now with the Upper Albany grant, we're able to extend that, and then we're going to be working on another grant to maybe get the clay arsenal at some point. Like, I need funding, and I could come right across Farmington Avenue to the south end, and we'll be good to go. I just need funding. So I'm continuously looking for grants to finish that project.
How many neighborhoods are left?
We have the entire south end, with the exception of Frog Hollow, but they are 4G. Yeah, the entire south end.
Entire south end, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Last question regarding STEM or STEAM. What's an initiative of MHIS to help fully campaign in the city regarding getting our kids and even adults to get into either STEM or STEAM programs?
So we have a partnership with the Hartford Public Library where they have a program for kids to get training and certification. I believe it's from 18 to 24. And part of our agreement is that we provide them with internships, so they get real hands-on experience within the department. We just finished with 5. We're about to get 5 more. So mainly that's through just partnerships. And, you know, we're asked all the time for internships, and we do what we can. Yeah.
My final question now is regarding AI. What's MHIS's integration or affiliation with AI, and is that being rolled out across the city?
There's a few things. Security first, right? We got to make sure we're protecting data. We're working on guardrails for that deployment. We're working with departments who are interested in AI and to help them get it, you know, up and running through our development team. Connor has been a huge participant in that, and, you know, yeah, we're just taking baby steps, but we'll get there.
Follow-up question, does the city have a preferred Apple software regarding AI?
Apple AI?
All right, any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
great work. All right, we will now stand in recess for about 5 minutes to give Hartford Public Schools time to set up. All right, we'll come back to order. And next up is the Hartford Public Schools Board of Education, and we have our superintendent, Dr. Andre Townsell, the superintendent and CEO of Hartford Public Schools, and his CFO, Caitlin Richard. I'm glad it's up there. Yes. All right. So please take it away.
Thank you so much, Council President Clark II. Thank you so much, City Council, for giving us the opportunity to share what we need for Hartford Public Schools to maintain success. We have been discussing our budget with the community since October 2025. We have done many community forums, staff meetings, meeting with you all as city leadership, and meeting with the state leadership to share the story of our budget deficit. Tonight represents the culmination of some of that work, where we will share our itemized estimate of expenditures. This represents our ask to the state and city to be able to run our school district and provide an excellent education to our students. For far too long, Hartford Public Schools has been making cuts to keep up with a structural deficit. Hartford has cut $200 million and 600 positions in the past decade, cutting $70 million in the past 3 years alone and 400 positions. There is nothing left to cut. We are down to the bone. During this process, we have focused on the structure, what needs to change at the state level to ensure we have enough money to serve our students. We have tirelessly advocated at the Capitol alongside many members of our community. The deficit is driven by factors outside of our control, including special education tuition and transportation, and we need states' help to be able to achieve financial sustainability. There are 2 weeks left in the legislative session and 1 month left before you vote on your budget, and we are advocating to keep Hartford whole. We have done our part to do strong fiscal management. You will see this in the proposal that there are cuts to positions and resources based on enrollment decline and expiring grants. These are reductions we must make to be good stewards of our resources. After those cuts, our ask is for an additional $60 million in order to maintain the rest of our resources, add in-house special education programming, and add literacy interventionists to elementary schools as required by state statute. We are asking for what we need to be able to continue running our school district and supporting students to thrive. And we are asking you all to join us in this call for action to keep Hartford whole. We believe that Hartford Public Schools' better days are in front of us, and this budget reflects that. And with that, I will park my bus and turn the microphone over to our Chief Financial Officer, Caitlin Richard, who will go into a detailed presentation of our budget, or an overview of our budget.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council. And you have in front of you, hopefully, the itemized list of expenditures, so the budget book with all of the detail, and a copy of this presentation. I'm going to start by just doing an overview of the overall fiscal context. Some of this we've talked about in some of our meetings, but I just want to set the tone and the landscape of what is driving our budget deficit, and then I'll get specifically into our budget proposal, what's different between this year and last year, and what we're asking for. This is just a glimpse of where we're at in the timeline. Last night we had the public hearing at our board meeting where community members could discuss their thoughts on the budget. Tonight we're meeting with you all. We then have the state legislative session ending on May 6th, so 2 weeks from today. So that is why we are in full advocacy mode at the state level now. And then of course you all will vote on the budget towards the end of May, and after that we will do our final budget vote. So once we understand the revenue from the state and city level, we will adopt our final budget. Right now what we're putting forward is our ask, our itemized list of expenditures of what it takes to run the district. So to get into some of the context, this slide here, and this is just showing some national level data just to situate Connecticut and when we talk about the state level issues. So this was a study done by the Education Law Center recently, where they looked at the gap in funding for high poverty and low poverty districts in every state across the country. And so what you can see is some states spend more on high poverty districts than low poverty districts. Utah is actually the best at doing that. But when you look at the bottom of the list is where you find Connecticut. So that's where there's the biggest gap in what high poverty districts and low poverty districts receive, with high poverty districts getting significantly less funding. So you might have heard the mayor say we have the most expensive education system and the most inequitable, and this is some of the data that backs that up. So Connecticut has the biggest gap in funding for high and low poverty. Even though it's spending a lot per pupil, there's that big gap. So that's part of what Hartford is experiencing in Connecticut, is this inequitable gap in resourcing. And on top of that, this next slide shows special education expenditures per student. It's a subset of states, but of these states, Connecticut is at the way end of the highest spending on special education per pupil out of these states. And actually the highest portion of that being borne by the local community. So Connecticut is one of 2 states that has no funding for special education in the state funding formula. They only fund through the excess cost grant, and this year through the seed grant, which is about $3 million. And so Connecticut has the highest expenditures for special ed and the least amount of that provided for by the state. So when you hear these conversations about gaps in school funding, about special education, I just wanted to situate that nationally, and that Connecticut really does stand out on the far end of the scale in those categories. When you look at our budget, we then have the compounding factor of the school choice system. Both school choice and also students attending private special education placements. And so when you look at the budget for next year, about 70% of it is funding for students who attend Hartford public schools, and about 30% at this point is for students who don't. So that includes students who go to non-Hartford magnet schools like CREC, who go to open choice schools, charter schools, or are in private special education placements. And I'll go into a bit more detail, and I know we talked about it a bit at one of the committee meetings, but just, so everyone's on the same page, it's really driven by tuition and specialized transportation. And so the challenge that we feel is we have this set of kind of non-discretionary expenses that are going to students who don't attend our schools, and we also need to run our school system. When we look at tuition, I'm not necessarily going to go line by line on this. These are our tuition actuals from last year. It's part of what I shared at the committee meeting. But just to break it down into categories, out of about $115 million we paid in tuition last year, about $18 million of that is general education tuition to CREC. About $97 million, so the vast majority of it is special education tuition. So this is both for CREC, when students have special education needs, for open choice schools, including when open choice schools outplace students, and for when students need to be in outplacement. We get the full ECS funding for magnet students and students in private placement, but we only get half when they're in open choice. And so this is one of the biggest parts of our budget, are these tuition payments, largely for special education that we're making, and it's something that goes up every year. So we've seen increases in the rates of tuition at about 8% every year, which is more than almost anything else in our budget. The other piece of this, outside of tuition, is transportation. This is part of the projected transportation budget for next year, and I really wanted to highlight that on that left pie chart, the smaller sliver of about $7 million is just regular transportation, so the big yellow buses that you see. The other part at $32 million is the curb-to-curb transportation for special education students. So the vast majority of that $40 million transportation budget is specialized transportation. That second pie chart is showing it by type of school. So out of this, only $15 million is for students who attend Hartford public schools. $7 million is for students who attend choice schools, so either open choice or magnet. And then about $17 million is for students in private placement. So this is just going to show in the transportation budget, a lot of it is being driven by that specialized transportation, and about $7 million of it is for students who don't attend Hartford public schools and go to choice schools. So you'll see that in some of our state level levers of what we're advocating for. And this is just kind of a basic summary of the real challenge we face in our budget is that we are paying when students choose to leave the system, and we're also paying when they choose to stay. And we're really running these two systems at one time, and it's creating this really unsustainable cost structure. This next piece is around our enrollment decline. I know we talked a bit about this at the committee as well, but we've seen significant enrollment decline over time, and significantly in the past year, so about 1,300, 1,400 fewer students this year compared to last year. So this is definitely a challenge we're facing. When students leave, we are often paying tuition, and we can only do so much to scale down our own costs. And so this was a question that's come up, is that, okay, enrollment is declining, why don't our costs go down automatically? And the answer is they do a little bit, but the issue is students are leaving from all different schools. And it might not be enough at one school in one grade level to need one fewer teacher. And so we often need a similar amount of resources as we did before. So you will see in this proposal tonight a decrease of positions related to enrollment. It's about 41 general education teachers that we no longer will need based on enrollment decline. But that amount is not enough to make up nearly anywhere near what the overall deficit is. So we're doing the part when we can to shrink based on enrollment, but because we mostly need to maintain the same cost structure, we end up paying more when students leave and maintaining a lot of the resources for students who stay. And that is what has resulted in this slide. This is what the superintendent referred to as $200 million cut in the past 10 years, $70 million in the past 3 years. So because costs don't automatically go down, Hartford has had to make cuts. And these cuts have happened every year. They've been pretty devastating. It's about 600 positions in the past decade, both at schools and at the central office. And this is where we've said, we can't do this anymore. There is nothing left to cut. You know, every single school worked on their budget in this in central office, and there just isn't, we're cutting to the bone, as the superintendent has said, which is why we've taken a different strategy this year to say, you know, we can make the cuts we can related to enrollment decline, but after that, there's nothing else that we can do. And that's what you see on this overall summary slide. So I'm going to kind of turn now and get into the details of our budget. I just wanted to ground in some of that overall context because I think it is unique to what shapes Hartford Public Schools. But as I've said, we've cut significantly. Thus, we've focused on the structural issues at the state level that need to shift to change how we are funded. We are proposing cuts related to one, enrollment decline. As I shared, there are a set of teaching positions that would no longer be needed. And there is also grant funds we have that are expiring. I'll talk more about that, where we've made associated cuts. And this is just part of what any district should do in terms of strong fiscal management. But that's already accounted for in the deficit. So that's something when we project our budget, we make assumptions around how many staff members we'll need, and some grants where we can actually decrease the expenses associated with them. And we're left with then the deficit that we have for next year. So as I said, it's driven by that huge part of our budget that is tuition and transportation. And I do want to clarify there's two different deficit numbers. So one is for fiscal year 26, that's the current year. That's about 22 million. Tonight we're focused on next year. That's what this budget proposal is about, is FY27. But we are also working at the state level to try to get support for the current year deficit. I know it was mentioned we have a surplus. That is not true. It is definitely a deficit, and we're working with the state to be able to identify any support they can provide. In terms of next year, that deficit, the baseline projection is that 52.5 million. So you will see that number plus a request to add more special ed programming and literacy interventionists. So I'll get into those details, but I just wanted to make clear those are two separate numbers. They sometimes are added together to get to 74.5 million, but they're two different fiscal years. So we're really going to focus on that FY27 piece tonight. Getting into the FY27 budget, and this is all, the budget book gives it at a level of detail of every single school, every single central office department, and some of these summaries. What you will see on the revenue front, so this top bar is our adopted revenue from last year. The bottom bar is our projected revenue for next year. So all of these are going to be comparisons to the budget we adopted last year. And you'll see a decrease in revenue of about $16 million. The reason for this is largely state grants and federal grants. And I'm going to get into exactly what it is on the next slide. But you can see education cost sharing, and this is just the revenue we know of right now. We're not making any assumptions about additional state funding or city funding that we don't know about. So it's holding all of that level, and then it's looking at the grant funds we do know about and understanding what the changes are. And so I'll go line by line for this one just to help you understand the revenue picture. So on the federal grants component, we're projecting about $6 million less compared to what we projected last year. Part of this is carryover funds. So Hartford has historically carried over federal grants. We are working to expend all of those funds in the year that they're assigned. It's part of good grants management. We've been working with CSD on that, and we have a deficit in the current year that those can support towards. An example of a grant that is just ending is the North Hartford Ascents Pipeline Grant. This is at 5 of our schools in North Hartford and supports community programming. That is a federal grant that ends in December. So you'll see that there is a decrease there. We have money for half the year, but not the other half. And so those expenses will stop midway through the year. There's a few other decreases, some in our title grants like Title I, just based on enrollment decline. And then we're waiting on the full service community schools grant. It was a federal grant that they discontinued early at that level. The state is going to be picking it up, but we're not quite sure on it yet, and so there's no revenue or expense for that counted right now. On the state grant front, a lot of this is just matching to what the actuals are from this current year. So part of our deficit for the current year is driven by lower revenue than anticipated, specifically in the Alliance grant. That was something where the original state estimate didn't account for enrollment decline. So we ended up getting less in the Alliance grant than we anticipated this year, which then will carry forward to next year. So some of these are just adjustments to match what we know to be true about the current year. Another piece is just some other grants that are ending. We have grants for School-Based Health Alliance. We have one for CT Strong Connections, which is for social workers. So just a set of state grants where this is the last year for them. And then finally, you will see in there that we are not assuming in this budget any contribution from the city. Like I said, this is basically saying we're assuming just the flat funding in ECS from the city. We're making assumptions about state and federal grants based on the knowledge that we have, and then we're making an ask basically to make up for the deficit. I'm going to turn to the expense side of the equation now. And I will say there is one difference in what is printed in the budget book versus what you see in the slides and will be in our updated budget book, which is the literacy interventionist. So I can say more about it, but it's about $3 million you'll see in salary and benefits of an increase. It's actually mandated in state statute for Alliance districts that we have literacy interventionists in elementary schools. It is not something we have done because we haven't had the money, and that is an explicit ask to the state to say, hey, if this is a mandate, we need the funding to be able to do it. So that is something we added. That's the only change from what you see printed in the budget book. But what you see on this slide, so again, the left is what we adopted last year as our expenses. On the right is what we are proposing for next year. And one piece just to notice is those first 3 buckets of the blue, red, green, those are all personnel expenses. So those are our certified salaries, non-certified salaries, and benefits. So that's about half the budget, a little more. And then you see that big orange category, plus most of the supplies and materials, is tuition, transportation, and utilities. So we have a really big part of our budget that we call it non-discretionary spend. We have very limited control over those 3 pieces, and it's a really big portion of the budget. So actually, if you look at budgets for other school districts, you'll see the personnel is about 80% of the budget, and the rest is kind of non-salary spend. But because our tuition is so massive in transportation, it really eats up a solid portion of the budget. And that's why when we make cuts, all we have to cut is people, and that's why a lot of roles have been cut over time. I'm going to go specifically into each of the increases or changes that you see for each of those line items. So when you look at salaries across both certified and non-certified, there's many changes happening on the salary front. It's about a $20 million increase. Part of that is an updated vacancy assumption. And so when we talked about our deficit for this year, part of the gap there is that we assumed we would have more vacancies than we actually did based on historical rates. So last year we had about 13% vacancies. We assumed 6% for this year. It's really closer to 3%. So that's part of the gap we're experiencing in the current budget. So this accounts for that. That says let's make our vacancy rate a more conservative 2.5%. This is back to where Hartford was before COVID was happening, and say vacancies really aren't in a way that we're saving a lot of money anymore, which I do want to emphasize is a good thing. It means teachers are in classrooms with students, but it has a budget impact. It also accounts for contractual salary increases. The teachers are kind of the biggest category of that. They're in the second year of a 3-year contract that had significant raises. And then this also includes that proposed increase for special education staff and for elementary resource teachers. The benefits then go along with that. So benefits are a percentage of salary. It accounts for the increases to salary and roles, and then also for just the rising cost of health insurance. So we've seen health insurance go up over time. We're self-insured. We work with the actuary for that. And so just overall, the cost per person is going up for health insurance. You will then see about a $10 million increase in tuition. That's about the 8% I referenced that we've been seeing every year. It is both in the tuition line and the professional services line. It's more of a coding related thing, but the professional services is services for what we call transitional secondary, so students over 18 that we provide for. But overall, it's about a $10 million increase to tuition. So that brings it to about $131 million total across those categories for tuition. And then transportation has about a $4 million increase. The reason for that, it's both the rates of the contract, so we have a contract with Autumn for transportation, and the need for additional curb-to-curb transportation, both for Hartford students, but also for students going to other schools. So those are the biggest categories in increase. That is what is making up the change between what we proposed last year and what we're proposing next year. And on both fronts, some of it makes up for new knowledge we have about this year and changes that we're anticipating between this year and next year. So when you put all that together, our revenue is at about $435.9 million, expenses are at $496.3, and that difference is about $60 million. What this represents is that deficit projection we did, that was 52.5, which is basically saying, hey, let's keep everything we have. We're gonna get rid of some teachers for enrollment decline, some grants we have declining, but that's kind of the baseline of what it takes to keep doing what we're doing. And then we're asking, and this is largely to the state has been very involved in asking us to do more in-house special education programming. I'll say more about it, but there's a state level grant that we can apply for to do that. And then the state statute around the $3 million for elementary literacy interventionists is us saying to the state, you know, this is required by state statute. We need the funding if we're going to be able to do that. Lots of detail on this slide, but it's a summary of all of the position changes, and I just want to highlight a few things of what you'll see in terms of the position counts. So we code things to what we call cost centers. The top buckets are in central cost centers, so in a department. Sometimes those things live at the school, but it's just where they're coded. And then things can be coded directly to school sites. So I just wanted to highlight a few things if you're reading the budget book that you may notice. So you will see an increase in positions that we categorize as direct service to schools. Part of this is just recoding of, we have something called student success centers, which include graduation specialists at our comprehensive high schools. They're at the schools, but now they're just being coded to that. So it's not a true change, but it's just a coding change. There was also then the positions we added back in health, specifically for dental, after the budget last year as a part of the additional funding we got. Then the real part so that's more coding changes, updates that happened this year. The big thing to know about this section is one of the lines is for special education paraprofessionals. There's a proposal to increase that by about 52, and that's part of that increasing our special education programming and needs of students. So you'll see that that's the biggest true change is for the special education paraprofessionals that are assigned to individual students at schools. What you will then see in the school cost centers is there's a net decrease in general education teaching positions. It's a decline of 41 teachers based on enrollment decline. And so this is something each school had to work through in their budget, where they had to account for if they lost students, they need fewer teachers, and how to make that work in their schedule. It adds the increase, though, of the 23 elementary literacy teachers. So resource teachers, literacy teachers is that ask to be able to have those literacy interventionists. You'll then see an overall decline in other school-based positions. A lot of this was also due to enrollment decline and or a decrease in grant funds available. So schools had fewer grant resources to be able to work with, and so were able to fund fewer positions. And then the last piece you will see, it's a proposal to increase the number of special education teachers is the increase there. And there also is just some security positions not reflected last year, but that doesn't represent a true increase. So overall, you'll see a net increase of positions. It is because we are asking for more special education teachers and paraprofessionals and literacy interventionists, but we are decreasing the number of general education teachers and other roles at schools based on enrollment decline. All right, a few more slides. This is the proposal for special education programming. So this is a conversation actually started at MARB, where they were sharing that they have seen success in districts who start more special education programming within their own district. It's also feedback we've gotten from the community at a lot of our budget meetings where they've said, we need to improve our special education services. What it helps is it retains more students in the district, and it does have a financial implication in that if we can save on the outplacement costs for students, it's about $130,000 per student right now when they go to a private special education school. And so part of this plan is to say if we can keep more students in district, they're closer to home, and hopefully we can save on some expenses that then we can invest back in the district. Of course, there will always be some students who need a different placement. We will provide that, but this is trying to do more of it ourselves. And as I mentioned, there is a competitive grant that starts next year that we will be able to apply for at the state level, and we've been encouraged directly to do so. That Hartford would be favored for something like this given kind of the challenges we have going on and the need to retain more students. So just to sum it up, the things that we are working on, one, we are advocating to change the financial conditions in which we are operating. That has been so much of our story. It's what we've tried to share tonight, is that at the state level, there needs to be a different way of funding Hartford Public Schools. I mean, every district is experiencing some of this, but especially with the school choice system and special education costs. And we're committed to making education as best as we possibly can to attract students, and we just need the resources to make that happen. We also, as I shared, are making reductions on based on strong fiscal management. So we are decreasing certain teacher positions as class size formulas allow for enrollment decline. And then we're advocating for a targeted increase with a long-term impact. So we're asking for that upfront money to start more special education services to hopefully invest in our schools and lead to more students attending them and decrease cost down the line for students attending other schools. So that's what we are working on. That's what we're committed to in our locus of control. Now let's talk about what we're asking for. So at the state level, we have had 3 priorities that would address the structure of how we are funded. One of those, and this one has been getting a lot of attention even just this week, is the adjustment to the ECS formula. So this is something you see a lot of districts advocating for. It would benefit every district in the state, and it's asking to adjust the ECS amount, which hasn't been changed in over a decade, we had $11,525 per student, to increase that every year for the next several years, and then actually index it to inflation, so every year there's an increase. So this would help with some of those rising costs over time. There's also part of that proposal that's to phase out over time general education tuition. So that's about $18 million that we pay to CREC, that there is a proposal to phase that out. Our next priority has been around special education and asking of fulfillment of the priorities from the last session. One was funding for special education. There was a new grant started called SEED. We got about $3 million, but it's only 20% funded. So we're missing out on about $16 million total. And then tuition rate setting. And this one, I cannot emphasize enough. There are no rates for the tuition that we get charged. We get charged different amounts by every different school, by CREC, by private special education providers for the same services for students. And we verify students are receiving services, but we have no control over what we pay. And so the state is working on setting a rate schedule to say this is a reasonable cost for these services. And what we really need is a reasonable cost and to get the funding to be able to provide those. Finally, we are asking when it comes to the open choice system that we are counted fully for open choice students in our ECS formula. We right now run a deficit on the open choice system in what we get from the state. We only get half the ECS, but we pay for special ed tuition. And we are also asking the state to pay for that specialized tuition for choice students. So the state right now pays for transportation, regular transportation. They do not pay it if the student has special needs. So we're asking them to pay for that. And so those are the biggest levers that could change the structure of how we are funded. And we've been talking at length with the state about that. What does it look like to have a bridge to get to that in some of the next legislative session, knowing that we are going to need help now to make it through next year? And then, of course, we are asking you all for an increased investment in a way that makes sense to you all, but for the city to also commit some type of funding to this. I will say I think it's mostly at the state level, but also just a commitment from the city as well to support in addressing that deficit. So those are our asks. We've presented kind of what we think it will take to run the system, some ideas we have for what we would like to add and do to have a thriving school system, and then we've been working at the state level and with you all to try to make that happen. So the last slide is just the timeline. It's just a reminder to everyone listening, there's 2 weeks left in the state legislative session. Then of course you all have about a month in voting on your budget. And once we understand what has happened on both of those fronts, at the end of May, we will do a final budget vote once we understand our full revenue picture. So that is the full presentation. I know that was a lot. I wanted to provide all of the context behind this, and happy to pause here and open it up for questions and thoughts.
Thank you very much for your thorough and detailed presentation. Now open the floor to Councilman Thomas for any questions. Councilman Thomas? Okay. We'll move on to Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Council President. Thanks to the both of you for this presentation. I like the detail. I think I would start by saying that it has been a complaint of mine in the past, not of yous, but of the superintendent, that it was hard. The budget was inscrutable, and the difference between what was needed and what was being asked for was hard to figure out. The mitigation was all sort of opaque. So I appreciate the clarity of this, and I want to recognize we have a number of Board of Ed members here. 5, I think, of you all here. Did I count? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry. And I want to also just express my appreciation to the board and the superintendent for working publicly, working together. The board meetings are a model of people who care, arguing and sorting stuff out publicly and in detail in a way that I wish that we could do. And so I've appreciated watching y'all put in work at every meeting, really put in work. And frankly, the clarity that we're getting here, and also the decision not to accept the mayor's suggestion that you don't need an increase. Because what that has done traditionally is let us off the hook. And we can say, oh, well, the mayor's handed us this thing, and the superintendent has said that that's enough, and so we can just vote yes and wash our hands of the decline in the quality of schools. So I much appreciate this more robust and slightly confrontational approach. I think we need it, and our kids deserve it. And I have one question. You said that you're asking for 60.4 million more than last year and the year before and the year before that and every year. And I know the legislature is uncertain, but what portion of that, roughly, do we think there's some real hope of getting from the legislature? Or put another way, what should we be trying to conjure up from our budget? Because I don't think we can conjure up. I mean, you know, I always want to take the money from the police, but their whole budget isn't that much. So what should we be seriously looking, you know, going line by line to find money for? Ballpark.
Clean up what I messed up. I think it's clear to advocate for the structural changes, those top 3 legislative priorities. I will say I have been encouraged over the last couple of weeks working collaboratively with our mayor, our governor, our Speaker of the House, Mr. Ritter, the Delegate Assembly for Howard. I mean, anybody who has an ear in the state in Hartford, the city has listened, which is good. And I do think that the wheels are turning on what is possible. It's difficult to say what we will get, but the good news is I think we may get something. Prayerfully, it's enough to not have to cut our foundation, our bone, because in good faith, that is not going to be good for our young people. So I'll just remain optimistic and encouraged by the conversation, and hopefully that amounts to something positive for Hartford Public Schools and the city of Hartford as a whole.
That was remarkably diplomatic. Understood.
Councilman Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation this evening. As distressing as it is, although it's been distressing for a number of years, and in part, I'm sure a lot of people are, including myself, are reflecting on the chef decision in trying to determine to what extent that decision has helped us either be a little better off today than we otherwise would be, or being a whole lot worse off today. And I don't know that we've ever gotten that analysis. And it's really been somewhat of a, somebody used the word earlier tonight, a pet peeve, but I think we really need that. I think the state of Connecticut owes Hartford that. I am really upset that we haven't had that. No meaningful look. It's almost 30 years now. The decision came out in 1996, but the solution didn't come for a number of years, such as it is, the so-called solution. That doesn't really address the issues before us tonight, but I felt I needed to put that out there. I'm wondering, and these may sound like some offbeat questions, but you started off the presentation indicating that there's a $22 million deficit in this year's budget. Well, today's April 22nd. This year ends June 30th. That's 2 months away. What happens on June 30th if you don't get $22 million? Does somebody not get paid? What happens as a real life situation if you don't get $22 million by June 30th?
Yeah, so as a real life, and then I'll say some of the work we are doing to try to address that, but say nothing happened, right? And there's 22.
Yeah, let's stick with nothing happening.
Yes, then it does, technically speaking, get absorbed into the city's budget at the end of the year. And so that's why we're trying to work with the state to prevent that. But just technically, if we have a budget in the BOE, almost similar to another department, it has to get reconciled in the city budget at the end of the year. So if nothing happened, that's what would happen. The only other solution would be to not pay people for the work that they've done.
So I think the city has a fund surplus right now, maybe $45 million. Are you telling me that if nothing happens, the $22 million shortfall that you have will be taken out of the $45 million fund surplus that the city has?
Yes, and what I will say is that I did spend the entire day with someone, so the state is conducting an analysis and audit of our budget projection in an effort to try to get us more funding. So I spent the entire day today with folks that the state had sent in to help with that piece, so that the state can support. I think that's their intention, is to support, and they're trying to do it before the legislative session is over for the FY26 piece. But yeah, that is what would happen if the state doesn't step in to help with that piece for FY26. And I will say there's moves being made right now to try to assess what that amount is, and for the state to be able to give us more funding.
So here the state has spent more than 10 years subjecting Hartford to the MARB, scrutinizing our budget every year with the goal of making sure that we build up a fund surplus, because when Council President Clark and myself joined this council 11 years ago, that fund surplus was just about at zero. And it was in danger of going below that. Had we been there and you had a $22 million deficit,
Right.
what then?
Right. And I was gonna say, I think that's where it's unsustainable, honestly. And I think that this can't be solved at just the city level. I feel very strongly about that. I think it is at the state level. And my understanding too is the state doesn't want that to happen to Hartford either, because the city doesn't have the resources to take on that type of deficit from the Board of Education. And so I think it is why the state is attempting to intervene and support us with that piece. And it's also why we're trying to say, like, this is a structural problem, right? It is a last year, it is a this year, it is a next year. So I agree with you. Our issue becomes quickly something the city also has to take on, and we're trying to intervene and have the state support with that, and ideally change the structure of how we're funded so we're not in that position.
Well, obviously, we all share the same goal. And it just seems the height of hypocrisy for the MARB to have put this emphasis on one side and then create this problem on the other side that they're not solving.
Agreed.
And I've also heard that the city of Hartford, this group, council and mayor, have been criticized for flat funding the school system for the last 10 years. But we've been subjected to the MARB for the last 10 years. And it's never been clear in any budget that I've seen exactly where you would get money to close these gaps. As Councilman Mixon said, your deficit exceeds the police budget.
Right.
And that's our largest, single budget. These are clearly very structural problems. They're structural problems not of our making. But I want to dive into those structural problems just a little bit. Talk about transportation for a second. As I understand it, that part of the transportation budget, and maybe it's not a big part, I don't know, it's that if a child lives a certain distance from the school, then they get transportation to school. Who sets that distance?
I'm trying to think, is that at the board?
Yeah, we set that administratively, but it's based off of best practices in public school transportation. But the reality is, we don't want our young people walking if they don't have to. But we can't increase or enhance the services if we wanted to, because we do not have the funds in real time today. So it can be convoluted, but the reality is, administratively, we set that based off of best practices on public school transportation.
Has anyone ever done an analysis to say if we, and I'm just making this up because I don't know what the real numbers are, but let's say a kid gets transportation if they're 0.7 miles from the school. Have we done an analysis to say, well, you're not going to get transportation if you live within 1.5 miles of a school? Is that?
Well, yeah, we have, our transportation director has been with us for a while, well-respected in the industry. And I know those studies have been done in the past under my watch, August 2025. No. Has it been done in the past? Yes.
Are they significant? I mean, I know a lot of the transportation is the door-to-door.
Right.
And the door-to-door seems pretty overwhelming.
Yes.
But I'm just wondering if if somebody says Hartford needs to make an effort, okay, so suppose we made an effort and said, okay, we're going to make our kids walk longer.
Right. That is true. That I don't have the data from. We can look at it. That's a good idea. On the previous analyses, I was just going to say about 7 million is the regular ed and 32 million is the door-to-door. So it'd be out of that 7 million we'd be talking. I will say our transportation contract, so that's with Autumn, is going to be up after next year, and we do plan to go out for RFP and to see if there's any efficiencies we can get Right now, they do all of that transportation, the reg ed and the door-to-door, to see if there's any efficiencies, maybe if we separated those two out. So we're going to try to see what we can do, but we could look back at what's been done in the past, but that would basically be targeting that 7 million portion of the reg ed.
If I may, Mr. Chair. Turn to special education now.
Yeah.
You in the presentation, you mentioned this 97 million in special education tuition, and you broke it down to non-Hartford public school magnets, open choice, and private placement. Now, within that, I think you said something about reimbursement that I didn't quite get, but so actually, let me have you run that by me again. Of that 97 million,
Yep.
how much of that is reimbursed to us?
We get about 12 million reimbursed from the state. And so that's in the excess cost grant. And so the way that it works is that if a student's services cost 4.5 times the average per pupil, which right now student services have to cost more than $112,000, they then pay for the excess above that. So anything above $112,000, they are paying for. But they only fund that at 75%. So they pay for 75% of the excess beyond $112,000. But in summary, out of the 97 million in tuition, we get about 12 from the state, specifically for special education, for the highest cost students.
And I know you've talked about investing money to try to do more of the special education in-house. So I presume that's because you believe there will be a savings
Yes.
to the city if we are able to do more of this in-house.
Yep.
Is there anything that's preventing us from doing this in-house now?
That's what that request for the investment in additional teachers and paraprofessionals are. We essentially just need a few more staff members to be able to make it work, so that we can actually have more of the programs. And it would be expanding on some of the programs we do have. So we have, I think, about 3 or 4 specialized programs in-house right now for specific disabilities. And there's one called iGoal, and the plan would be to build out another program so we can serve even more students. Rise, Step, and iGoal are the 3 programs.
Is that program really focused more on the private placement side of this than the other 2 buckets?
Yes. It is, although, it is. Although sometimes what I'll say is students will go through the lottery, get an open choice suburban district, and then that district outplaces them, and then we pay the bill for that. So in that, which is also interesting.
But we couldn't control that if they're.
We have no say.
We don't have any control on the open
We
choice.
Correct. So we have no say. So in that sense, it could help on that front if a student could go to a placement within Hartford. But yeah, that's exactly the structural piece that we're talking about, that is a thing that happens.
There is a lot that is out of our control, as you can see, and that's why we're advocating at the state for that structure to change. We spend so much money on young people who have a Hartford address but do not go to a Hartford public school, but we do get the bill. And I do believe that must change, because in real time there are young people that are here, and we want to invest in our young people that are here while also attracting our young people to Hartford public schools. And someone may say, well, what are they coming back to? The Hartford Promise that says if you live in the city of Hartford, go to a Hartford public school, earn a 3.0 grade point average with a 93% attendance rate, guaranteed up to $100,000 to a college of your choice across the country. So it's a reason to come home. We do have some of the best and brightest educators right here in Hartford Public Schools. The young person in the state of Connecticut with the highest PSAT score is a Hartford Public School student. Our athletics are winning state championships, sometimes for some and for the first time in the history of their existence. So excellence is happening. In bad faith, they may want to say there's nothing going on. Yeah, something is going on in Hartford. And we do believe that people can also choose Hartford Public Schools while they're choosing schools. It's a great place to be. I see it in real time. We all see it with our feet on the ground and boots on the land. So we're advocating for Hartford to the best of our ability. And we do believe if the structure changes in favor of Hartford Public School, we can be a model urban school district leading the nation just like the state leads the nation.
Well, I'm behind you 100% on that, and I certainly wish you a lot of success. I was shocked, dismayed, and just in total disbelief when I heard, and I believe it was the chef people, criticizing the city of Hartford, you, for trying to promote Hartford schools. That, to me, is just absolutely unconscionable. I don't know where the heck that kind of criticism possibly comes from. And I absolutely applaud you in fact, I'm going to the event at Hartford Public High on May 14th. They're showcasing Hartford Public High in an attempt to attract more people into this wonderful facility that has a planetarium. How many schools in the whole country have a planetarium? And we have one right here in Hartford. And it's got a telescope, it's got an observatory, it's got a beautiful facility. So, yes, we need, but this has been, and I'm repeating myself now, this has been part of the chef issue, that many of our, I forget which term you use, but the neighborhood schools, the default schools, have suffered greatly, and we need them to be strong. We need them to be strong for the economics of Hartford to be strong. So, anyway, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. So your ask of the city, what is that exact dollar amount? Your ask of the city, because I see here the 5 million and the 3 million, I believe that part of that is ask for the state. If you could just clarify that, please.
Yeah, we don't actually have a specific number from the city. We're saying we need 60 million total. We think most of that needs to come at the state level, and then for the city to consider an increase to us that seems reasonable and what you're able to achieve. So.
But I do want to add, there was about $7 million that they gave us last year for programs like the dental and health clinics, the OPP, our piece of the pie. So those opportunities, at minimum, if we can get that back, because not getting that contributes to our deficit.
Okay. So with that said, if you got that dollar amount from the city, you would use those dollars to do the same programming as last year?
Well,
or to continue that programming?
We could. It should be at the pleasure of the Board of Education to decide how to spend those funds. But I do recall last year the city specifically wanted to pay for that. So if we don't have that, then that probably would go away. But I do believe whatever our revenue is, it is incumbent on the elected and appointed Board of Education to allocate where those resources go.
Okay. And I know that you have ask of the city and you have ask of the state. And what is your plan on your side to help mitigate some of this deficit?
We've already done it. We cut up to $19 million already just by lack of enrollment, by grants that are already going away. We've already did our cutting, and we still need the 60 million. So there's nothing to cut. When I say bone, I mean bone. When I say structure and foundation, that's exactly what I mean. There's nothing to cut. In good faith, as our educational leader, I cannot cut teachers from a classroom. The reason why we have a $22 million deficit for fiscal year 26, one of those contributing factors are paraeducators. When I'm visiting schools, I see a young person that needs support. And I say, why don't this young person have support? Because we did not budget for a paraeducator. We had to hire that paraeducator. It wasn't budgeted for in the prior year, so that contributed millions to the $22 million deficit. We're doing right for kids, and we're asking for the resources to do right for kids.
Yep. Thank you.
All set. All right, Councilwoman Rosado.
Thank you, Council President. I'm just going to ask that you bear with me, and you'll probably correct me on a lot of things. Budgeting is not my forte here.
No, go for it.
Okay, so back in December, and I have to say this because sorry. As I was driving to City Council, I had in my mind still, right? You hear a lot of things. Back in December, in the news, Connecticut Insider, we were working with a $35 million gap. Today, it's, what, 60 million? 60.4 million. So I just need clarification. Is this it? Is it going to change?
I mean, this.
Because you have to understand us, right? I mean, I'm going to speak for myself. 35 million, and now we're at 60 million. So I just need clarification on page 18. On page 18, out of this slide, it says revenues of 435.9 million, expenses of 496.3 million, and additional dollars needed of 60.4 million. So that is a gap of $8 million in this presentation, but then I see these two dots in the bottom that you are requesting 5 million and 3 millions, which makes up the 8 million. So is that something that, even though you're requesting it, you are already included in the 60 million? Because if not, the figures don't add up.
Yes. Okay, let me respond to your first part.
Okay.
So yes, when we started this conversation in the fall, we had estimated around a $35 million deficit. As we got more information about the current year, that's when it increased. So that's when we went from about 35 million to the 52.5, which also does include that one-time funding from the city. And so that was, as we experienced the deficit in the current year, which is about $22 million, and we learned more about that, it impacts the next year. And so we had to adjust our assumptions. Some of those are revenue and you'll see that in the revenue decline that we won't have access to, and some of it is expense, largely around the positions that Dr. Townsell mentioned and the vacancy assumption. So all that was doing was saying in the fall we had one projection, but then as we take into account the data we have from this year, that's when it increased to about 52.5 million. So that's the number we've been using since about January, I believe, is when we had, and that's also when we get more data on tuition, on mid-year enrollment. It's just the time when we have more information. So that's when we updated our deficit assumption we were working with through the budget process. And then what you see on that side, it's the 52.5 is that deficit assumption we've been working with since January. Then it is plus 8 million for doing new things. So that deficit was just based on, let's continue doing what we're doing now. That's the gap between revenue and expense to do that. Then we're asking to add the special ed programming and literacy interventionists, which gets to the 60 million.
Okay, so based on what you said, so you have gone back to the state and said, and have had conversations about the 60 million.
We have had conversations about the 52.5 and about the in-house special education programming, where they've encouraged us to apply for that competitive grant. We will be talking to them about the literacy interventionist piece. The reason we added that is because it's a state statute. So it's essentially us asking the state, if this is going to be a state statute, we need the funding for it. So that's the one piece we haven't talked about, is the literacy interventionist piece.
And you're talking about the science of reading.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
so you just said if it is, I mean, it is a state statute.
Yes, that's the conversation with the state of, if this is, this is a state statute, so we need the funding to be able to do this piece, because funding did not come with that part of the statute.
But the science of reading should have been included in prior budgets, right?
100%. That is absolutely true. As we flip over every rock and read all of the statutes for public education, this administration is going to do what the law says do. And what I saw in real time is that we did not have those interventionists, and I had to make the ask, and that's why that number changed, because we're trying to implement the law with fidelity. It has not been done in the past. It will be done in the future.
So I can quote you on saying that it has not been done in the past, that the prior
Quote me on-
administration.
You can quote me on everything.
In the prior administration, you are stating that the science of reading, hiring teachers that are letter certified, making sure that our children are not failing, making sure that children who enter kindergarten go through a proper evaluation, because that's part of the science of reading, is when a child enters kindergarten, an evaluation must be performed. That evaluation is sent to the state science of reading up at the education department, and they are responsible for reading that evaluation and providing that child, if that child needs tutoring, special ed, whatever it is, so that when that child reaches 3rd grade, they know how to read. Because you need to learn how to read in order to read to learn. And so you're saying that that was not done before?
Let me say, you are preaching to the choir. We do not have the reading interventionist. We're asking for the reading interventionist.
So let me ask you another question. So are you saying that the Hartford school system doesn't have letter certified teachers right now?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we need reading interventionists according to the law. Our teachers are working.
I understand that we do
Well, I
need.
do not want to go back and forth, so I'll pause and let me know when I can speak.
Thank you for that. So what I'm saying is, this budget is in front of me, right? And so I need data. I need to know how many children we have in our classrooms, how many teachers are letter certified. Go ahead.
We are prepared to do a presentation thoroughly on the science of reading. I believe you requested that from us. We're ready to rock and roll with it. So whenever we get that platform, we will give all of that information to you.
Now, in the prior budget that we had, first public hearing budget that we had at Batchelder, do I recall that you sent a presentation on science of reading?
Our board chair did.
Okay. But there was no data in it with how many teachers were certified and how many students and evaluations and...
Well, I do want to be clear. We're well prepared to present on the science of reading whenever we have that opportunity to do so.
Okay.
So based on your resolution, I believe you led that resolution.
I did.
The team put together a presentation answering the questions that you asked in that resolution.
That is correct.
And that is what you asked. So when I came to speak at the budget hearing, that's what I delivered. The team put together the presentation to answer your questions for your resolution.
Okay. So now that I have you here, Board Chair, you were on the Board of Ed prior administration.
I've been on the Board of Ed 8 years.
Okay. So the concern of the science of reading, which was a state statute, was never discussed in any of the BOE meetings?
We led, as the presentation would have stated, we lead in Connecticut in implementing things for the science of reading. What they're speaking to, because we're ahead of the curve, so what the superintendent and CFO is speaking of tonight is the coaching part. That's a statute requirement. It's not that we're not doing exactly what we're supposed to. It's the coaching that's we're also supposed to have. We have teachers, if you look at some of our Board of Ed meetings over the years, we have extensive presentations with our last superintendent on how we implement the science of reading, letters, who's trained, how we train, building leaders. We train teachers to train other teachers. We are very good in that, and we have a teacher here this evening that was part of that, and we're the leader in Connecticut on that. But the coaching aspect is what we were lacking in that is in state statute that we have to meet that mandate. Not the implementation of it, because we knew it was coming and we actually got ahead of it and got training ahead of it. We've spent funds to get this training for our staff, building level, central office level. So we are leaders, and we're proud of that.
And I understand that, and thank you for that, and please correct me. So based on what you said, and we're ahead of the game, but if we don't have teachers that are certified, how does that convey into our students?
Yeah, I don't know what, we do have teachers that are certified. Yeah. It's a coaching component that was brought down through the legislature that is unfunded. They're saying we and it's for alliance districts, for the districts that are identified that are struggling more than some of our affluent districts, yes, they saying for you guys, you have to have these coaches and do these extra things, but we're not giving you money to do it. So it's a difference between the teachers and the training and who's implemented the science of reading, who are letter-trained teachers. That part has never been a problem for us. It's the coaching that is now the mandate that we have to abide by. Our superintendent said we're going to get the coaches, but it comes with a cost. We haven't had money to implement that, but we still have to do it. So it's the coaching, not the teaching.
May I ask, you said a number of times we don't have teachers that are certified. Who told you that?
I asked how many teachers are certified.
I don't have that data on the budget presentation to share that. We do have a presentation, but you're saying we don't have teachers that are certified. Who shared that?
If I said that is incorrect. What I
Thank you.
asked was how many teachers are letter certified?
I can get back to you on that information. I do want to share, when that resolution was passed in January, we did not get the ask until March. And immediately we came prepared to present, and you called me and shared that we would present at a later date, that you would ask us to come possibly in June or possibly in July. So I'm not prepared to present that tonight. If I was to present that tonight, I would have been fully prepared. I'm not prepared tonight. Please invite me to present. Our team is locked, loaded, and ready because they presented it to me and they're ready to present it to you.
That was our conversation? Was that the conversation that you and I had about the
Please
presentation?
correct me if I'm wrong.
I am not going to correct you if you're wrong or not. It was agreed upon that you would make that presentation after the budget.
Correct, but you're asking me now. This is not after the budget.
I am not asking you to make a presentation. I am asking you questions on this budget.
No, you said how many teachers do we have certified? I can't give that to you in good faith right now.
Okay, well then, I would ask you to send us the presentation so that we can look at the answers on
I
there.
do believe the president, our board chair, sent that to you. Would you like me to send it to you electronically?
It didn't have the information that I requested on the resolution.
We answered every question you asked. Please reply to it with what more information you may need. We'd be more than happy to provide that information. We believe in transparency and effective communication. Whatever you need, we will provide.
I will send it back with my questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Dr. Townsell, Chairwoman Brody, CFO Richard. Thank you for your presentation to fellow board members out there. Within the $5 and $3 million additional request, understanding that it's for literacy interventionists, how many, start off with this, how many school districts are part of the Alliance District?
How many total school districts in
Yes.
the state? I think there's 35 of them.
How many of those are big cities, such as like Hartford?
All of the big cities are in it.
All the big cities,
Yep.
all right. So it's a similar thing.
Yeah.
Do you know if any of these 35 are already getting funds for intervention specialists?
No one's getting funds for it. They might be doing it out of different funds, reallocating, but no one's getting funding for it right now.
Okay. Do you know how within those districts they're actually receiving the state required funds?
Meaning they would get Alliance funds, but they're not getting additional funding for the literacy interventionists, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, so no one's getting more money for the literacy interventionists.
How long has the district been a part of the Alliance District?
That's a long time. I don't have the exact answer, but
It's about
definitely
10?
since before 2017, yeah.
Okay, all right. Who was the superintendent back then? Who was the superintendent back then? Was it not Beth? Who was the Kishimoto? Okay, thank you. What's baked into the $3 million?
It's 23 literacy interventionists, and that's the cost of the salary and benefits for that. It's for each elementary school. So any school that has grades K through 3 is counted in that.
What's the average salary?
A little over $100,000. And then there's,
That's plus benefits, or?
yeah,
Okay.
yep.
How many, so, if I understand you correctly, we don't have any intervention literacy
We
specialists?
do have some, so I do want to name that. Some schools have chosen to use some of their supplementary grant funds to fund a literacy interventionist. So some are choosing to use, they get Title I is the biggest source of funding schools get directly. Some of them have chosen to fund a literacy interventionist with that, but it is not all 23 schools.
And part of this $3 million ask is because Title I funds are being sunset?
They are decreasing overall, but the ask is to say if there's basically a state statute that says we need it, we would need to provide that to all schools instead of requiring them to use their own discretionary Title I funds in order to fund it.
Now, do you know out of the entire Alliance District, how many schools are doing what Hartford Public Schools is currently doing?
I actually don't know, but I'm curious now what the other Alliance
Could
districts are
you,
doing.
if you find that
Yeah,
information,
yeah.
could you please provide that?
Yep, I could ask some of the other big cities just to see.
Now, regarding the $5 million in in-house special ed programming.
Yep.
Same similar setup. How many, is this just for Hartford Public Schools or everybody under the Alliance?
This
district?
would just, this is unrelated to Alliance. So we
Okay.
would be saying for Hartford Public Schools. And the governor, it's a grant that starts next year in FY27. It's a competitive grant. So any district can apply for funding to do more in-house special ed programming.
What's baked into the $5 million?
So it's staff, it's teachers,
How many?
about 10 teachers and about 50 paraprofessionals, and I believe about 5 social workers.
How many schools?
So some of that is still going to be figured out, but it would be expanding iGoals at probably an existing school. So probably 2 different school locations. It's essentially an expansion of programming.
Yeah, so we have 3 programs, RISE, iGoals, and the STEP program with a limited number of students, but we're going to open up more seats, more teachers, so we can keep our young people right here, because when they go elsewhere, we get a random bill. Something could be for $50,000, another could be for $100,000, same service. We think it's best practice if we serve our own young people by building the program here.
Regarding the school locations, is there a particular level of schooling, such as elementary, middle, combo thereof, high school?
Yes, they're spread. So I know our STEP program, I believe, is in Hartford Public High. Our iGoals program is in Rawson School, as well as, I think, Burns and Milner. We have 39 schools, so excuse me, I'm trying to run it off. We can get you that information.
That would be great,
We
yeah.
have,
Yeah,
but
you
it's
can-
a small program.
I'm sorry, we do have programming in wherever we have room in schools, and where it makes sense, because some of our, a lot of our students are wheelchair bound, so we make sense of where we have them. But yeah,
Okay.
they're spread out throughout the city.
Just give me that
Yes.
information, that'll be great. Are the salaries comparable to the intervention specialists, or do they vary? I know paras don't. Paras
Yeah, I was gonna
are
say
some of
special ed
the
teacher would be
lowest
comparable.
paid
Those are both
teachers.
teacher category, yeah.
Yeah.
Paraprofessional would be closer to 50,000-ish. Social worker is more similar to a teacher.
Yep. And, all right, for transportation, I was just talking to Councilman Gale. Every year we've been on council, transportation dramatically increased. I think I can go as far back as remembering when transportation was in its low 20 million, 12 million. So over the course of time, and it's not been a long time, but a significant amount of time, it has dramatically increased. So has the district ever done an assessment or is planning to do an assessment regarding transportation? as to taking factors of cost. I know there's some varying factors, and we talked about this at the state capitol. But even to the point of doing assessment if you can do transportation in-house, run
Yeah,
by Hartford Public
I think
Schools.
everything is on the table as we're moving forward, looking to be as efficient as we can. I do know our contract with our buses, I think we have another year on that contract. But as that comes to a close, it is our expectation to do an analysis over how we're transporting our young people and to ensure we're as efficient as we can be, by also providing the best service possible to our students.
Please take a look at that. Me personally, I just would be curious if there's any way, understanding your difficulty and budgets, I do it similar on my daytime job, always trying to figure out a way how to save money. If that's a way to do that, I think that's something that we should take a look at that, or even, how many vehicles does the district lease, or do you own all your vehicles? I know you have some for food delivery. It's a separate budget?
Yes, our food budget, that's an enterprise fund. That's not a part of our deficit or anything. It's its own federal entity.
So you get federal funds for
That's federal, yeah.
those okay. Because I was just interested, as we're talking about, Hartford has a partnership with East Hartford, looking to how we can merge resources. We have an example within the city. MHIS handles the city side and the board side. I think we should take a look at where we have duplicative services on a district side and city side, and have conversations as how we can consolidate those. I've been talking about that since I've been on council, because I think, such as, for example, buildings and grounds, we have DPW. It could be a division, and so we can really save on some of those administrative cost burdens, especially if the city has a little bit more infrastructure than the Board of Ed is, our finance departments, our HRs. So now getting to my point regarding vehicles, if there's a way that after you do your assessment, seeing if that can be done as the city purchasing fleet, us issuing additional municipal bonds to take care of this program, or even through our vehicle or VET budget, something to the effect of how we can actually really consolidate services and make it more efficient, and ultimately bring down the operating costs for HPS. Let's see.
Can I add, Mr. President?
Yes,
that
ma'am.
In our transportation budget, that is a lot out of our control too. Because when we're not in total control over out of district placements, we're not in control of the transportation. If we're not in control of the IEP, the individualized plan for the young person, if another district who our resident child goes to, when they're in control of saying, I believe this student should have door-to-door, that's out of our control. So that's what Ms. Richard was speaking to, us advocating and trying to do things at the state level to gain more control over, even through legislation, over IEPs. If we are not the decision maker on something that has a financial implication, so we are working, and if we get some of that control to be at the table to help make those decisions, then we could be potentially in control of transportation. Because when you're spending money and it's not your money, you're easier to say you can have everything you want. Some of our students deserve it, some they need it, but when we're not at the table to even know, and we get the bill, so we're trying to at least get an eye in on what actually happens in those meetings, to see what is actually going on. Because we get the bill, but we're not there being a decision maker. But I can speak personally as a parent that the bus my child takes, there's not an empty seat on it. But I don't know how that works, depending on, because she attends a magnet school, but she goes to Weaver High School. That's where her magnet school is placed. So we're doing those kind of things to say we don't need an entire bus for a school that has very little students. We're saying you're going to the same location, you live in the same neighborhood, so we're gonna fill the bus, and even the bus is making 2 different stops at 2 different locations. So I think our transportation department has been very thoughtful in maximizing in that regard. Over the years, we hadn't always been in that place, but we've been, I think, fiscally responsible in getting to that part to say we can do things much better, but there are other things that we're trying to gain control over, and I think there's an appetite at the legislative to have us at the table in some of these decision-making meetings. But our transportation department and our board has worked together in making things make sense, because our contracts go year to year, but that one, and I feel we got a really good contract that no one could match what our current vendor actually is provided to us. That's why we did renew with them, and it's our only contract that lasts like throughout many years for that reason, so we could have locked in that price, because we have a lot going on when it comes to transportation, but a lot of it isn't really our local kids that we're transporting around. A lot of it is what's kind of what we don't really control.
Thank you. Is that, so are you referring to Autumn?
Yes.
Okay. Another question, and I'm wrapping up. And I know this has been a hot topic lately, conversations that we've had with this council, school consolidations and closures. Has the district, or is the district, and I know last year, prior superintendent, this question, I might have asked this question to her and her team, where were they in that process as we're looking at the overall cost and overall cost drivers? And it was mentioned that the schools, many of the schools were not even occupied at the 50% level. And she said that the policy committee had to take a look at the policy, make some recommendations to vote on it, because the prior policy under the last DME had expired. Is that a topic of conversation? Has there anything been looked at? Do you plan on looking at this to see overall as a district? And I'm not going to go into the other school part. But as a district, where are we at? And can we achieve certain savings? Understanding too, is not going to achieve the 20 million, the 60 million, but what number actually is it that can add to the cost savings?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. I'll be completely honest and transparent. Once we peel back the onion on our budget, the top priority went to advocate for that 60 million and change that we need. But we did put out a request for proposals to do feasibility studies of all of our facilities. And we do believe that's the next level of work once we solve the structure to see how efficient we are in real time as a school system. So that is on the table to study our facilities. And I'll also share, while we're having that down the line as one of a top 3 priorities, so to speak. That's why we went into conversation in real time contracted with CASA K-12 to earn as many young people back as we possibly can. So when we do that study, we have real life numbers of us doing what we can with what we have. Knowing that we're losing students every year, the question is, can we slow or stop the bleed? And if so, can we also earn back? And while we're doing that, we will study our facilities to see if we're as effective and as efficient as we possibly can be.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Townsend. I think, added to the structural issue, it's my last question, I'll end on this. Do you consider the Chef versus O'Neill court decision legislation as a driver for our structural issues as a school district?
Yes.
I would say yes. And I think that a lot of the dynamic I was referring to where we were both paying for students who leave and then we have to maintain a lot of the cost structure for students who stay is driven by the school choice system. And I think fundamentally the state needs to look at how the school choice system is funded. I think it is great that students have choices, they can exercise that choice, but the problem is right now it is draining resources out of Hartford to serve both the students who leave and the students who choose to stay. So I do think the funding system, the apparatus that undergirds CHEF needs to be looked at. I'll say 30 years ago, the biggest expense we have related to CHEF is special education tuition. That looked really different a long time ago, right? And so there's a lot of things that have changed, and I think a lot of the funding system has been piecemealed together over time, and that requires a comprehensive look. I will say that the State Department of Education is currently conducting a study on CHEF that is supposed to have recommendations in December. We're going to be participating and giving feedback on that. And the governor has recently called for a commission to study state funding and how it intersects with special education. So my answer is yes, it is a driver of this deficit, specifically in how it is funded, and that is what needs to change at the state level to be able to get us to be in a better place, alongside the broader special education expenses for students who are in private placement.
Additionally, on the marketing and advertising piece, Hartford Public Schools has been censored on marketing and advertising. For example, I said, I want to say choose Hartford. I was told I cannot say choose Hartford, but I see signs all over the community at the mall that says choose Craig. So there's an inequity there. We do not have an equal opportunity to market and advertise, which also contributes.
And I just do want to say that I never want to get, I never want anyone to feel like we do not value magnet schools. We understood that Hartford was in a place where it shouldn't have been, and what the state was funding and providing for Hartford students. And a lawsuit was brought about to say that isn't right and there needs to be an investment. The state, I think, needs to take a look at how they're funding and what they're agreeing to. Because I think a lot of times we're like, oh, chef, this was, this is a horrible thing, but the state is in control of that. And you referenced the 50% occupancy. That's not even just neighborhood schools. We do not control the enrollment of our magnet schools. There's a regional school choice office that controls the seats. So we can't say we'll fill magnet schools to the rim. We just can't. It can be a waiting list. So we have to have those hard conversations with the state of Connecticut to say this is what you have in place, and students want access. We can fill our own magnet schools with kids who leave the city to go elsewhere. And we're not going to ignore that we have a school system that was created and funded, and they have surpluses at the end of their school year that was created as a result of this lawsuit. So you can't have something created for Hartford children, and then you have Hartford children suffering because of it. So we do have to have some conversations with the state to say, when you are negotiating, you're agreeing to these things and saying they are good. Hartford Public Schools should not be suffering as a result of something that was created to make Hartford better off.
Do you think Hartford should sue based upon the new inequity?
I plead the fifth, Mr. President.
My question was, do I think Hartford should sue because of the inequity imposed on the school district? But the chairwoman is pleading the fifth.
You are the city. You are interveners in this lawsuit. We don't have a say. We're looking for our city attorneys to be our voice in those rooms, because you became an intervener for a reason, to make sure Hartford is represented at the table. So through that, we're hoping we get some advocacy there.
Okay, all right. Now, I promise you, it's my final question as a follow-up. How much do you need from this body? I just want a number to work with.
If you can cover the whole thing, I'd be happy. But in good faith, you know, that's why we're working collaboratively. I can't say a number because I don't want to, you know, rock the boat. But the reality is we need finances from the state, from the city. So whatever the city feels generous to do while working collaboratively with the state to bottom line close it, we're appreciative of that. If you want to drain the rainy day, we appreciate that. If you want to advocate elsewhere, we appreciate that. So we're definitely grateful, and beggars can't be choosers, I'll say that.
Very well said. All right. Councilman. I was getting, no, because I heard something that way, so that's why. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor. I think these are mostly for Ms. Richard, just a couple follow-up detailed questions. Concerning Councilman Gill's question about what, like the current deficit of 20-odd million and how that gets funded at the end of the year, you said it, I thought I heard us all sort of talking about it coming from the city's fund, what do you call it? The fund balance. But before that, we go into the city's that year's surplus.
Correct, yes.
So it's only when we exhaust whatever 10, 12 million that's left over from other departments, then we would go to the fund balance.
Correct.
So it might not be a full 20 million from the fund balance, it might be 10 million or 8 million.
It would go to the surplus before to the reserves.
Okay, so
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that right. And then you were talking about, well, so first concerning Councilwoman Rosado's questions about the reading, compliance with the reading intervention and science of reading requirements. Certified teachers is one thing and reading interventionists is another thing, right? So it's not that we're not in compliance and we need to spend money because our teachers aren't certified, it's because we need these other extra people.
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure.
100%. Thanks for clearing that up,
Yeah,
yes.
I wasn't clear, and I feel like I got a little lost in the sauce with the terms. And then, Ms. Richard, you said that some schools have used their Title I money to cover that. But that means, practically speaking, that money is lost for other things, like a librarian.
That's exactly right.
Correct. Picking and choosing.
Right, and I say because, like, my daughter's school, there's no school librarian, right? So we have a lovely library, but they can't hardly use it. I had, like, one other... Oh, and concerning the question that Councilman Clark was asking about school closure or consolidation, my understanding, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, is like the cost of running a school, like there's the cost of the building, keeping, you know, making the pipes not freeze, that's kind of fixed whether there's kids in it or not, and then there's the cost of the education that happens in the building, which has to do with the number of kids and the number of teachers. So in some sense, if we consolidate or close schools, until we sell those school buildings, we're not offloading a lot of costs because we're still educating the same number of children, right?
Correct. If you close the school, those students need to go somewhere. One fear is that they could choose to leave the district entirely, right? And then the other piece is they do have to attend another school, which means a lot of the teachers and staff members move to that school. So that's why school consolidations overall aren't a huge budget savings. It wouldn't change the deficit, right? And that is because you need to keep educating those students. There's some efficiencies in some of the class size ratios, but you don't save as much as you would think. Yeah, it would be like the principal, you would save that, administrative, but most of the teachers actually need to educate the kids who are going to another school.
Gotcha.
And also, magnet schools, we can't close. If we say we have, because we always, you hear it, 11 high schools, 3 are comprehensive. So you have a lot of magnet high schools. We could not just, as the board, we couldn't say, we're just going to close those schools. We have to ask the state for permission to close a magnet school. So it's that part too. It's a web.
Gotcha. Thank you. Those were my only other questions.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Townsell, Chairwoman Brody, CFO Richard, thank you very much for your presentation. Since we have no other business to discuss, this committee hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much. Tomorrow we have Hartford Police Department, the Office of the City Treasurer. What else am I missing? That's it? That's it. All right, then tomorrow will be our final night. Thank you. Oh, and the department, thank you. The Departments of Family, Children, and Youth. This budget hearing is now adjourned.